Welcome to the 35th International Fundraising Congress, IFC 2015. I'm so delighted that all of you could make it here. I'm so delighted that I'm able to be here and do this initial part of the opening plenary. We have 1,000 fundraisers from our 60 countries in here today. Welcome. I started my Resource Alliance journey back in 1992. And I know Per Stenbeck is sitting somewhere here when he first invited me to speak at the Fundraising Congress at that point in time. And since then, I have been involved with the Resource Alliance for all these years in various volunteer capacity. My mind was like, my blind was blown, so to say. When I came here, there were so many causes I didn't know about. There were so many methodologies I hadn't heard about. There were so many connections and networks that I benefited from. And all that in that one Congress in 1992. But there is one thing that was missing. I realized that back in Asia, we were not giving our fundraisers this kind of opportunity to be able to expose to the opportunities and the trends of the future. I had two options. I could sit around and say, why isn't the then International Fundraising Group not doing anything in Asia? Or I could do it myself. And that's my volunteer journey, the beginnings of it. Because I decided if somebody had to do it, it had to be me. And somebody had to do it. It had to be then and there, because you could otherwise just sit around and talk about it. And so I'm so glad that that journey has taken me from being a volunteer for Asia to the board of Resource Alliance to being the chair of it. And then after I rotated out, I continue to be a volunteer even today. And I hope many of you, especially the first-timers who are here in this room. How many of you in this room, first-timers? Yay, welcome. And I sure hope one of you stand here 25 years later and talk about your journey of making things happen, because this is what it is about creating the change that we want to see. And as the manifesto said, the Resource Alliance hopes to build the bridge of best ideas, connections, and opportunities for each of us. And that's what this conference is about. When I look at how the fundraising landscape has changed, it started with, I would say, I could categorize it into 4, A, B, C, D. The A started with altruism. So when we had our master classes, we had our workshops, then it was about how do you get to the altruistic passion of donors and potential supporters. Let's do direct mail. Let's write a letter. Let's tell a story. Over the years, it added to that was the B, the business focused. That's where the corporate philanthropy, and now it's gone on to be, shared value, social responsibility, all that has been added. And now we are more or less at C, community involved, where it's not just about raising funds, so-called in the West, and sending it to the developing countries, but really engaging the people in the re-emerging economies of the world, and together with the community doing what's right. And the best thing that's happened is technology in order to make community involvement possible through the use of social media and other digital platforms. And going forward, I see D, daring entrepreneurs, because it's no longer about philanthropy. It's going to be about taking entrepreneurial decisions of how you may have social impact. How do you ensure that needs are being met in an entrepreneurial way rather than a mere philanthropic, altruistic way? And so I see the landscape changing, and so we have been at the IFC through the Resource Alliance at the leading edge of it, helping you know what's going to come in the future so that you are ready and able to respond to it. Last year, in the closing plenary, Kumi Naidu talked about what's happening in the Arctic with the threat of Shell drilling for oil in the Arctic. And he talked about their mission, trying to stop that from happening. And the wonderfully named kayaktivists who were out in full force to bring about change. And last month, Shell decided to withdraw from the Arctic. Change is a constant. It's not something that happens now and then. It is indeed a constant. And in a time of global connection, the backdrop that we have is 24/7 news, gossip, scandals, truths, untruths. And we are exposed to all of this. But despite all of that, there is plenty of love, plenty of compassion, plenty of empathy that we see around us. And there are many people who inspire us. I feel as fundraisers, we have one of the best jobs in the world because we get to inspire others to do something about the situation in the world, in our communities, across the borders, wherever. And we have that opportunity to inspire others, but how would we do that if we ourselves are not inspired? What if we just look at it as yet another job? And if that's the case, how will we ever translate that inspiration to the people we are hoping will join us on this journey? And especially the young people these days don't need an institution to inspire them. They're born inspired. They're born idealists. And I want to, for us, as fundraisers, to be able to harness that passion, that creativity, that inventiveness that the young of today have, and together with our knowledge, ensure we can be the change we want to see in this world. I would like to begin with examples from around the world of young people who refused to be overwhelmed. Young people who decided to take up an issue and do something about it, with or without an NGO or a non-profit helping them. Let's start with the characteristics of these young people. Do they work for an NGO or an organization? No. Did they start with a budget proposal, a spreadsheet, a grant application? No. Were they born when I first attended IFC? No. They were all born, most of them, in the 21st century. And that's the future we are so fortunate to work with if only we decide to do so. So let me start by taking you across 5 continents and start with the disruption in communications. What would you do if you want the news to be heard by the young people? What would you do if you want to communicate social issues to young people? This is what 2 news anchors did in Senegal, Africa, to get the news out to the people that they wanted it to reach, the youth. Let's see an example from Senegal.
Bonjour. Ok. Bienvenue, installez-vous, on a des nouvelles pour vous. Il y a des bonnes, il y a des mauvaises, mais il y a des nouvelles pour vous. Bienvenue, installez-vous, on a des nouvelles pour vous. Il y a des bonnes, il y a des mauvaises, mais il y a des nouvelles pour vous. Dès que le ciel est gris, dans certains quartiers, on court vite se mettre à l'abri. Le cauchemar des inondations, encore dans les esprits. Le médicament qui prévient est mieux que celui qui guérit. Bientôt le ciel sera gris, on a beau curer les rigoles, caniveaux et canalisations. Tant que sur le chemin de l'eau, il y a des habitations, aux mêmes causes, les mêmes effets. Il y aura des inondations. Ensuite des télétons où les dons n'iront peut-être pas aux populations. Ko bayul lo lek dinga dundé lu ñay sarax ñak faratal soufa tax at mu né ñaar téeméeri junni gone faatu Afrique sawu jant képp lim gi gën na yaatu ci ñàkk lekk lu baax wala ñàkk ñam wu doy lu ñu mënoon wattu la suñu amoon nguur yu koy def ful la faj ko du làmbaatu ba daj ko nañu xoolaat mbay ak càmm yokk budget aj ko lu nguuru Afrique yëpp diggee woon la ca Maputo 2003 ba tey buñ ko defoon pourtant li dox sunu digganteeg reg ñu fat ko tax baykat yi di laajte ana sunu 10%.
So there you have it, news as the young would like to hear it. Then these news anchors decided to use rap as their channel of communication. And of course, in addition to live news that they broadcast on a news channel, their YouTube channel also provided the currency for the young to go and understand the social causes that's facing their country and do something about it. In Europe, there's a lot of talk about the refugee crisis. There is a huge situation there of the refugee crisis. And what is happening there is nobody's waiting at this point in time for a refugee agency to come and support. They're not waiting at this time for a immigration type of agency to come and tell them what to do. What's happening is young people are deciding to go welcome the refugees anyway. They are taking their little toys so that the little friends of theirs crossing there into their border will feel welcome. They don't need an NGO or a development agency to tell them what to do. They know intuitively what needs done. And they're willing to go ahead and do it. Now we can engage with them and make them part of our efforts, or they're going to cut us out as middlemen, just like anything that doesn't add value. So if we decide to continue the way we used to be, maybe we won't be having these guys as our supporters in the future. The other disruption is in the area of advocacy. And my next story is from Brazil. Technology has helped, and social media has helped put the power of communication in the hands of anybody, especially the younger generation. And I want to share with you this film from Brazil that talks about a young woman who did not wait for public education advocacy groups to help her. She just decided something needs to be done, and she did it. This is what she did.
Welcome back. It's not often that a 14-year-old schoolgirl is able to trigger reform within an entire public education system. But that's just what happened in Brazil after Isadora Faber used social media to demand improvements to schools throughout the country. The young blogger ended up bringing major reform to classrooms and schoolyards all over Brazil, but not before she encountered violent harassment and death threats for daring to challenge the system. Our own Brazilian-born Giovanna Vitola has the story.
She may look like an ordinary 14-year-old, but Brazilian schoolgirl Isadora Faber is far from average. In Brazil, she's famous, and it's all thanks to a simple blog she created to document problems at her public school using her phone camera. She demanded better teaching conditions and improvements to the dilapidated classrooms. Despite achieving these things, she's faced strong opposition, even death threats, but she has never backed down.
Coitada da menina foi crucificada viva.
A darling of the traditional media, Isadora owes her success to social media. Her Facebook page now has more than 500,000 followers.
Eu fico bem feliz porque eu sei que aquilo mudou graças ao diário de classe, mas ao mesmo tempo a única coisa que eu fiz foi correr atrás dos nossos direitos, que é educação pública de qualidade.
É, porque você é exatamente aluna de uma escola pública, né? Ela fala assim de um jeito que eu tô assim um pouco intimidada aqui na nossa empresa.
And there you have it. No agencies. She just decided it had to be done. The question is, where are we in the picture, and how are we going to harness this kind of energy and passion? Let's go to the United States of America, where when the oil spill that happened in the Gulf of Mexico, a little girl again decided something had to be done. And she decided to do it through fundraising. Let's see the video.
My grandparents lived down there, and my dad put my grandfather on speakerphone. And I started crying at the table. And I ran up and wrote a letter to Audubon because I just couldn't sit there and watch. I want to help. I can draw, and I want to really make a difference to help out those birds. Well, this was my first ever drawing I did for this project. And I've seen these birds all the time in the Gulf. And they were just recovering from being endangered out of all the overfishing and recent oil spills and DDT and all those crazy things. And they finally are off the endangered list and on the mend, still threatened. And this is just like a terrible thing for them. We're gonna try to save them, but it's not gonna be easy. Well, at first I thought I was lucky if I raised $500. But now I realize that it went further. $155,000 to $165,000. My dad said if it made past $2,500, he'd be over the moon. Now he's been around the moon and Jupiter at least 7 times. Anybody can change the world, from little toddlers to elderly, to seniors and elderly people, to kids my age. Kids can do it. Kids can change the world. And the story of me just proves it even more. Anybody can do it. If I can, you can. Anybody can.
Anybody can. And that's the passion that 11-year-olds today have about being the change. And if I can, you can, she says, fundraisers. And I want to take you to Asia. And this is my 7-year-old. And this is a story of what's happening in my family. And I thought nothing better than my own personal story. At the age of 5, when I visited India, where my mom and dad and my in-laws live, many of the relatives gave my little boy little gifts, and cash. So at the end of the vacation, I asked him what he wanted to do with the money that he had from all his relatives. And he asked me a question, "Mom, am I rich?" And I said, "Yeah, for a kid your age, that's quite a substantial amount. I would say you are rich." And he said, "Well, if I'm rich, I'm going to give it to people who don't have as much." And since then, he was 5 then, he's 7 today. He has been on a mission to give and to get. Give because he's saving on all his little gifts, and he always asks when somebody says, "What do you want?" They said cash. And he's got all that is his to give. And he gets, because I've got 2 older boys. So the oldest is 25 and he's a working adult. So his friends are his target, my little boy's target, because they're all working people. So he kind of leverages his connections and gets. And that's a 7-year-old boy without much of prompting that had decided that fundraising is a real cool thing to do. And that's the reality of Generation G. I call it Generation G because that generation is Generation Generosity. And they are also Generation Gratitude because they have seen the disparity in the world because of their access to information, because they can see what's happening around their world, and they can see the disparity, and they have an affinity to gratitude. They want to do something because they, at the age of 5, I believe, in Akshay's case, had figured out that he is way better than many around him, and he wanted to help. And Generation G is also Generation Global. It is not about in your backyard anymore. They want to make a difference where they see a difference can be made. And that's the kind of future we are going into as fundraisers by profession. But then it's not just the youth who have the prerogative to make changes. Here is a story from South Africa, where this dear granny at the age of 100 decided to jump 3,000 feet for fundraising. And so age is no barrier to making a change. And if you look at how things are changing, you will see that participation, inspiration, interaction, return on involvement, creating movements, that's the reality of today and going forward. How are we as fundraisers ensuring our fundraising strategy, our fundraising methodologies, our fundraising communication have these as our key foundation stones instead of where we used to be in the previous era? Now, it's one thing to say that we need to do it. And you will, in this conference, find out ways to do it through the workshops and the various big hall sessions. But you will notice that there is one thing in all of these stories that I told you. The sense of purpose that each of these young people and the old person had in their efforts to make a difference. And that brings us nicely to Dan Pallotta, because he's a leading activist, a champion fundraiser, and a committed defender of the charity sector. His TED Talk is pushing for 4 million views on the way we think of charity is dead wrong. And Dan is here because through him, we will be able to learn more. It's one thing to say you shouldn't fear if you want to be a change maker. It's another thing to say, have the courage to make the difference, to be the change. But how do you put all this into real practical ways of doing it? And I'm so glad we have Dan Pallotta with us to share his insight on how to think differently about thinking differently. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Pallotta.